Continuing with Genesis 39.1. And Joseph was brought down to Mitzrayim, and Potiphar, the chamberlain of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, a Mitzrayim, brought him of the hands of the Ishmaelim, who had brought him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Mitzrayim. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found favor in his sight, and served him, and made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Mitzrayim's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a good-looking person, and well-favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused, and said to his master's wife, Behold, my master knows not what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. And there is none greater in this house than I, neither has he kept anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not to her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his work, and there was none of the men of the house there with him. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and went outside. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled outside, that she called to the men of her house, and spoke to them, saying, See, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and went outside. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spoke to him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant whom thou hast brought to us came in to me to have his sport with me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled outside. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which he spoke to him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his anger burned. And Joseph's master took him, and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the officer of the prison. And the officer of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it prosper. And it came to pass after these things, that the butler of the king of Mitzrayim and his baker offended their lord the king of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh was angry against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in custody. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream on the same night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Mitzrayim, who were bound in the prison. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in custody in his lord's house, saying, Why do you look so sadly today? And they said to him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and on the vine were 3 tendrils, and it was though it budded, and its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. And Paro's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Paro's cup, and I gave the cup into Paro's hand. And Joseph said to him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 tendrils are 3 days. Within another 3 days shall Paro lift up thy head and restore thee to thy place, and thou shalt deliver Paro's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. But think of me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, to me, and make mention of me to Paro, and bring me out of this house, for I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. And when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also, in my dream, behold, I had 3 baskets of white bread on my head, and in the uttermost basket there was all manner of baked food for Paro, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within another 3 days shall Paro lift up thy head from off of thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. And it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Paro's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Paro's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Nevertheless, the chief butler didn't remember Joseph, but forgot him. And it came to pass at the end of 2 years that Paro dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 cows, well favored and fat of flesh, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ill favored and lean of flesh, and stood by the other cows upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and the lean-fleshed cows ate up the 7 well-favored and fat cows. So Paro awoke, and he slept and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up on one stalk, plump and good. And behold, 7 ears, thin and blasted by the east wind, sprang up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 plump and full ears. And Paro awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Mitzrayim, and all her wise men. And Paro told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them to Paro. And then spoke the chief butler to Paro, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Paro was angry with his servants, and put me in custody in the office of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker, and we dreamed a dream in one night, and we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was with us a young man, a Hebrew servant to the officer of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. I was restored to my office, and he was hanged. Then Paro sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his garments and came to Paro. And Paro said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Paro, saying, It's not me. God shall give Paro a favorable answer. And Paro said to Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 cows, fat of flesh, and well favored, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ill favored, and lean of flesh, such as I never saw in all the land of Mitzrayim for badness. And the lean and the ill favored cows did eat up the first 7 fat cows, and when they had eaten them up, it couldn't be known that they had eaten them, for they were still ill favored as at the beginning. So I awoke, and I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up on one stalk, full and good, and behold, 7 ears, withered, thin, and blasted by the east wind, sprang up after them, and the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this to the magicians, but there was none that could explain it to me. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has declared to Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one, and the 7 thin and ill-favored cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I've spoken to Pharaoh. What God is about to do he has shown to Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Mitzrayim, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Mitzrayim, and the famine shall consume the land, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And as for the repetition of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is fast determined by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Mitzrayim. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up 1/5 part of the land of Mitzrayim in the 7 years of plenty. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come up, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Mitzrayim, that the land perish not through the famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such as one as this, a man who is the Spirit of God? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown thee all this, there's none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and he put it on Joseph's hand. And he arrayed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the 2nd chariot which he had. And they cried before him, Avrech, bow the knee, and made him ruler over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphanat Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenat, the daughter of Potphera, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went through all the land of Mitzrayim. And in the 70 years of plenty the earth brought forth by heaps. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Mitzrayim, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field which was round about every city laid he up within it. And Joseph gathered corn like the sand of the sea, very much, until he had stopped numbering, for it was without number. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of the famine came, whom Asenat, the daughter of Potphera, priest, On bore to him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he, has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenty that were in the land of Mitzrayim were ended, and the 7 years of famine began to come, according to Joseph had said. And the famine was in all the land, but the land of Mitzrayim there was bread. And when all the land of Mitzrayim was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all Mitzrayim, "Go to Joseph, what he says you to you, do." And the famine was all over the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to Mitzrayim. And the famine grew severe in the land of Mitzrayim. And all the countries came to Mitzrayim, to Joseph, to buy corn, because the famine was so severe in all the earth. That's Genesis 41:57. That's Genesis 42.1.